I'm about to sneeze. Oh my god, as soon as I start recording, I'm about to sneeze. I got itch in my nose. Come on, don't sneeze, don't sneeze. Okay, so last time what we looked at was the nervous system. We looked at the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Nerves, neurons, and today we're going to have a look at the brain. All right? So we're actually going to have a look at part of the spine, but mostly the brain, the central nervous system. Okay, so right. I'm going to say central nervous system, the brain and spine. That should make complete sense. I'm going to turn around and say we're going to predominantly be looking at the brain. I think that should make more sense. All right. Now, things you need to know. The brain has billions, I mean billions and billions and billions of neurons, nerve cells, and they're interconnected. There are trillions of connections. And it's responsible for controlling complex behaviors. Like what you're doing right now, talking, thinking, well, hopefully not talking, hopefully you're listening, thinking. All these are complex behaviors that we all know take part in your brain. Different parts of your brain have different functions. Okay. And you've got to know which part of your brain has what function. Now, I've done this kind of diagrammatically as well, meaning I've got some pictures in there because I like looking at pictures because pictures are nice. There's the cerebral cortex, and it's the curly stuff on the outside of your brain. Now, I'm very lucky that I've seen a human brain. I've dissected them. So, it is really rather interesting. And it looks kind of grey, should we call it grey matter? But that's your cerebral cortex. It's the outer layer of neural tissue. It's where you are, your consciousness, your memory, intelligence, and language. That's all here. That's just cerebral cortex. The other part of your brain you need to know is a cerebellum. It controls balance, muscle coordination, and movement. So when us daddies dance and we do daddy dancing, it is that part, the cerebellum at the back, that controls our movement. Ours is more developed because daddies dance better than you teenagers. Okay, the next part is the medulla. All right, that controls your heart rate, breathing, things you don't think about. You don't need to think about your heartbeat going, hold on, I need to beat my heartbeat. All right, beat. Yeah, so hold on, just give me a second, my heart needs to beat again, come on, beat. We don't think about it. It happens unconsciously. Then we have here the pituitary gland. This controls your other glands. It actually inadvertently controls things like how much water you retain back, um, how much glucose you release into your system. So it controls quite a lot, does a pituitary gland, and that's why it's called a master gland. Okay, now investigating the brain. Okay, it's really interesting. We know very, very little compared to other things, even compared to space, the universe, and everything. We know very little about the brain. It is really difficult to study. And the reason is, I can't turn around and say, right, year 11, I'm just going to drill a hole into your head and do an experiment for the class. Can't do that. And you can't isolate a part of the brain because it's interconnected. And it's a problem because we don't know that much. It is really hard to treat things like brain damage, even depression. And mental health is really hard to treat because we don't understand as much as we should do about the brain. So, how do we do it? Okay. Well, we've got to be careful. Certain treatments, and there are certain treatments, and it can damage even things like your personality permanently. So, one thing we can do is when there's accidents and patient and people have accidents and damage part of the brain, we can look at what they behave like before and what they behave like afterwards. There's a really cool one, and I'm talking about studying. Not that this was cool for this person. Um, and there's some horrible ones. The horrible one is Phineas Cage. An iron rod damaged the front of his frontal lobe, the front part of his brain, and he had major personality changes. So that's why we know the cerebral cortex handles personality. There was an interesting one where a guy had an injury to his brain, and it wasn't permanent, but it was part of his brain that dealt with sight. And what happened is it changed how he worked with numbers. So no longer were numbers like they were to me and you, they were colours. And he became ridiculously good at maths. So we can look at people who've had certain damage to the brain, and we can, think, right, that's how that part of the brain is damaged, and that's affected that person's personality, or how that person moves, or how that person sees things. Like, I read one where, and there's a brilliant book written by a doctor called the Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. And I think he had a stroke, or part of his brain was damaged, and he thought his wife was a hat. I've heard of people who've had damage to the cerebral cortex, and they can smell the color orange. They can smell colors. Okay. So the other thing they can do is add tiny electrodes. There's Elon Musk and his Neuralink, and people would turn around and say, right, I can't move, and you're more than welcome to experiment on my brain to see if you can make me move. And they can actually put tiny electrodes in and send electrical impulses. There's a really interesting experiment where someone couldn't see, and they put electrodes in. So they had this digital camera, and it sent electrical impulses into little electrodes into their brain. I have a really good friend of mine who I did some work with at Leeds University, and they were using magnetic fields to stimulate people's brains. And I remember this one, they would stimulate the medulla, and they'd give them this, they'd increase this magnetic field in that area of the brain, and the person would move, they'd twitch an arm or something. Or you can also, there's MRI, not functional MRI. Well, you can use functional MRI, but you guys will have heard of MRI scans, and you can scan someone, and it's non-invasive, and you can say, right, have a look at this picture, and you can see in real time what part of their brain is working. Um, Alexis, cool, yeah, me too, me too. Um, I had one for my back, but yeah, I did a bit. I really feel sorry for people who are claustrophobic. But yeah, you can see your brain working in real time. You can, even these, you can play some music and see which part of their brain works. You can ask them to remember something and see which part of their brain works. And it's also, you can look at where blood flow is increased. Your brain, believe it or not, uses 25% of your resources. All right, benefits. Brain research, or neuroscience, neurology, it allows you to treat things like epilepsy, Parkinson's disease, and it can improve quality of life. Now, there are big problems, big risks, because as I said, we don't know a lot about the brain. You can actually easily permanently damage the brain. We do not understand enough. The truth is, and I hope some of you guys head down a path of scientific research, and we need more of it on the brain. We have no idea. We cannot predict what's going to happen under certain procedures. All right. So here are your key terms you need to remember. I'm going to stop the recording just after I turn around and say, as per usual, I'll give you 10 easy, 10 medium, 10 hard questions.